Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 3. Today we will discuss about gender and age, but before we start our discuss, let me introduce our members. The first there is Faisal Adi Putra, the second there is Reza Nursafitri, the third there is Nurul Wardian, and then Resty Hidayat, and the next Eria Prajayanti, and the last there is Nani. So let's start our discussion.
Well, the first slide is about definition, gender, and age. Well, in all speech communities, the linguistics form used by women and men contrast to different degrees, and it's claimed women are more linguistically polite than men, for instance, and that women and men emphasize different speech function, and the focus here will be on evidence that women and men from the same speech community may use different linguistic form, and gender or sex has come to refer to categories distinguished by biological characteristic, while gender is more appropriate to distinguishing people on the basis of their social-cultural behavior, including speech. Gender differences in language are often just one aspect of more pervasive linguistic differences in the society reflecting social status or power differences. Next, gender-exclusive speech differences, highly structured communities. Okay, as I explained before, community is very hierarchical, and within each level of the hierarchy, men are more powerful than women. And also, English English pronouns, for example, don't reflect the gender of the speaker. The third-person singular pronouns encode the gender of the referent, like she versus he, while in the other languages like Arabic, the gender of the speaker is encoded. And next, gender preferential speech features. In Western urban communities where women's or men's social roles overlap, the speech form they use also overlap. In other words, women and men don't use completely different forms. They use different quantities of or frequencies in the same forms. For instance, women are more in pronunciation and fewer in pronunciation than men in words like swimming or typing. Next, it is the graphs of the social group or classes. Does the speech of women in one social class resemble that of women from different classes, or does it more closely resemble the speech of the men from their own social class? Gill, 1983, tried to answer this complicated question in one of his studies, and we will see the graphs of the social group or classes between women and men. Okay, in the lowest and the highest social groups, the women's speech is closer to that of the men in the same group than to that of women in other groups. In these groups, class membership seems to be more important than gender identity, and this may indicate they identify more strongly with women from the next social group than with men from their own social groups. Possible reasons for this are discussed. Well, the next is gender preferential speech features, social dialect research. Okay, We'll go directly to the example of this. For example, in Canada, the pronunciation of L in chants such as I'll, Y, A, and ill faith differs between women and men. In Australia, some men and women pronounce the initial sound in thing as f, but men do it more than women. Well, my friends will continue my presentation.
Okay, I will continue the material. The next material is about gender and social class. The linguistic features which is different in the speech of women and men are usually features which also distinguish the speech of people from different social classes. In every social class, men use more vernacular forms than women. You can see the example. Woman's speech is closer to that of the man in the same group than to that woman in other group. Therefore, class membership seems to be more important than gender identity. In the lowest and the highest group of women's speech closer to that man in the same group than to that woman in other group. In this group, class membership seems to be more important than gender identity. But this is not so true of women in group 2. Their score of the percent woman vernacular form is closer to that woman in group 1 than it is to that of men from the own group. This might indicate they identify more strongly with women from the next social group than with men from their own social group. Possible reasons for this are discussed below. Okay, the next material will continue by Resty Hidayat.
Okay, the next material about explanation of women's linguistic behavior. So, why do women use more standard form than men? Because at the last four different talk, not mutually exclusive explanation were suggested. The first appeals to social class and its related status for an explanation. The second refers to women's role in society, and the third to women's status as subordinate group, and the fourth to the function of speech in expressing gender identity and especially masculinity. And the next, the social status explanation. Some linguists have suggested that women use more standard speech form than men because they are more status conscious than men. The claim is that women are more aware of the fact that the way they speak signals their social class background or social status in the community. The fact the woman interviewed in New York and in Norwich reported that they use more standard form than they actually did has also been used to support this explanation. Women generally lack status in the society, and so it is suggested some try to accure it by using standard speech form and by reporting that they use even more of this form than they actually do. And the next material about women's role are guardian of society's values. A woman placed in the home. For example, Mr. Godley, an early New Zealand settler, believed in the civilian influence of women. When two young men she knew were about to begin work on a ship situation in the South Island province of Canterbury in 1952, she warned them they would become semi-barbarous. She begged them to have a lay figure of a lady, carefully draped, sit up in their usually sitting room, and always behave if it was their mother. So, a second explanation for the fact that women use more standard form than men points to the way society tends to accept better behavior for women than for men. So the next is subordinate groups must be polite. For example, you are an introuble bore Mr. Bond. Why don't you simply shut up and let someone speak who has more interesting ideas to contribute? Said Lord Huntley, in the well-educated and cultured accent of the overprivileged. A third explanation which has been proposed for women use of more standard form is that people who are subordinate must be polite, and women greater use of standard forms may relate it not only to their own face protection need, but also to those of the people they are talking to, is more promising. And then the next for vernacular forms express machismo. That men prefer vernacular forms because they carry macho connotation of masculinity and toughness. If this is true, it would also explain why many women might not want to use such forms.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Eria Prajayanti and now I will continue the presentation. So the next material is about age-graded feature of speech. Age-graded feature of speech is the differences in speech within a community that are associated with age. Children and adults has differences in speech, such as first in pitch. Pitch is the degree of highness or lowness of a tone. Children, whether it's a girl or boy, have similar pitch in speech, but when become an adult, their pitch are changed. The man pitch will deeper and lower than boy, while the woman pitch will higher than girl. The second is pronunciation. Pronunciation is the way in which a word is pronounced. Almost of children, they cannot pronounce some word properly. In Indonesia, many children cannot pronounce R sound, so they will substitute R into L or Y sound. For example, when they say rumah, they will say lumah or yumah. But an adult can pronounce all of the words properly unless they are slurred. Third is vocabulary. Vocabulary is the collection of words used in language. Children do not have a lot of vocabulary because they only imitate the words of their parents say, or they cannot read fluently yet, while adults have many vocabulary because they can read well and learn a lot of vocabulary from the school and the surrounding neighborhood. Fourth is grammar. Grammar is the structure, rules of language. Children, as I said before, only imitate the words of their parents say, or they are not good at reading and talking yet. For example, instead of saying, I want to play with the ball, they will just say, I want play ball. The main point of the message is there, but it doesn't flow the way it should. For another example, instead of saying, I swam yesterday, they will say, I swim yesterday. It's because they don't understand tenses yet, while adults understand it well because they have been learn it from the school and the surrounding neighborhood. And the last is slang. Slang is very informal language or specific word used by a particular group of people, especially young people. For example, in Indonesia, young people always say gabut to indicate that they are not have activity and feel bored. while for the older people it may sound weird because they never heard it before. Okay, I think that's all for my explanation. The next material will be delivered by my friends. Thank you.
Okay, I will continue our explanation about age and social dialect data. So, social dialect research has provided a great deal of information about pattern of pronunciation and grammar for different age group. The frequency of vernacular form is different. So we can see at the table in age we have childhood and adolescent, and the second is middle age, and the last is old age. For the vernacular, we have high, reduce, and increase again. So a common pattern show that the use of vernacular form is high in childhood and adolescence. The usage steadily reduces as people approach middle age when social pressures to conform are greatest. And then vernacular usage gradually increase again in old age as social pressure reduces. So as the conclusion, we can see that in childhood we have we have high vernacular. In the middle age we have reduced vernacular, and in old age we have increase again in vernacular.
Okay, the last material is about age grading and language change. When a linguistic change is spreading to a community, there will be a regular increase or decrease in the use of the linguistic form over time. Younger people will use less of the form and older people more. This will show up in a graph as a low use of the form by older people and a higher use among younger people. You can see on the table 1 where it's about vernacular pronunciation of standard in medial and final position in New Zealand English. Explaining about that, the result of the researchers' experiment. If this were an accurate interpretation of the data, one would predict that the percentage of vernacular form will increase again in old age. So, the incidence of vernacular form for people of retirement age would be higher than for the 40 until 60 age group. Then the data suggests the vernacular pronunciation are gradually displacing standard in the speech of younger people. Actually, the social dialect study of teenage speech in the town indicated that the was rapidly replacing standard each in words like tooth and mouth, and V was replacing standard E in words like mother and brother. Next, the table 2. It's about frequency of lie across age groups in Toronto. The sudden increase in the use of lie 15 until 16 years old and its dramatic reduction in the speech of 17 until 19 years old supports the claim that lie is an age-graded feature. Change that occurs at a particular point in a person's life and then leisurely disappears. If instead like is a change in progress, we would expect it to continue to increase in frequency in the speech of young people as they grow older. It has been suggested that this is what is happening in other varieties of English, such as London English, but there is no published research on this yet. This example also highlights the relationship between language and ethnicity, which is so apparent in a community where a particular language is associated with a particular ethnic group. I think that's all about the last material, age grading and language change. Thank you.
Well, I think that's all of our presentation today, and I do apologize if there are mistaken in my or in our explanation. And thank you very much for your nice attention, and assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.